Welcome back. Since the war in Syria began 6 years ago, we've seen thousands of young people travel to the Middle East to fight alongside the so-called Islamic State. This is an issue that my next guest finds deeply worrying. He's Omar Ghobash, the United Arab Emirates ambassador to Russia. Ambassador Ghobash has written a book, Letters to a Young Muslim, aimed at helping the young avoid falling into the trap of radicalisation. Well, I'm pleased to say Ambassador Ghobash joins me here in the studio. Good to see you, Ambassador.
Thank you.
This is an incredibly personal account, directed and written with your 15-year-old son in mind.
Yes, this is true. He's now 16. I thought about these issues from my personal point of view when I was 15, and I felt that the issues hadn't really been tackled in the last 30 years. And I felt that my son's generation were exposed to a whole bunch of ideas which were very powerful, very simple, and very kind of tempting. Not that, you know, I think that my son himself was tempted, but I felt very much for his generation. And I tried to, rather than put forward a kind of a dogmatic, doctrinal approach to the texts of Islam, I tried to put forward an approach to life. Rather than focusing in on the frustrations, the anger, the political, economic situation of the Arab world and the Muslim world, I try to focus on a different approach in which you could be constructive, you could look for the best, you could look for something that was more in tune with one's humanity.
In many ways as well, it feels as though reading the book that you're grappling with your own childhood and the issues that you've faced growing up. Your father was assassinated by a gunman, and so to me it feels like almost like you're writing it for your book, but you're almost writing it for yourself.
Yeah, I can't deny that there were times when I thought that I was actually writing it to my 15-year-old self. And I think part of the reason I felt so strongly about it is that I always expected others to come forward and to clarify some of these basic issues that had been troubling me as a 15-year-old. Given that I'd researched contemporary Islamic literature, and I'd looked at the different ways in which Islam is portrayed and presented to us to this day, I felt that there was something missing. And you know, I think to make a contribution, you don't necessarily need to be the Islamic scholar. You need to be a human being with a certain kind of approach to life and a desire to contribute in some way. So that's precisely what I tried to do.
There are many people writing and discussing Islam today. Are you calling in this book for a reform of Islam or a new way to look at it?
No, that's not it at all. And I've heard this idea of reform, and you know, there are writers in the US, for example, who are talking about some kind of top-down reform of Islam. I mean, I don't see it like that at all. If I think of one word, I think of clarification. There are many questions that young people in particular have these days. With globalization, with the spread of technology, with the incredible amount of information and contradictory information that we have on the internet, there are a set of new questions that are being posed that are still being, you know, verbalized. They haven't actually been put into words, but I think it's coming. And we have a clerical class that possesses this tremendous kind of moral knowledge, but they don't necessarily have the means by which to express it in modern terms, in terms that younger people would understand, or even people of my generation, to be honest. Life has become much more complex than 7th or 10th or 13th century Arabia. And I think that's one of the critical reasons why we need to have clarification as opposed to some kind of reform. Reform suggests we know where we want to go and we know where we're coming from. And I also think that it's very important to realize in the Islamic world that we are perhaps quite astonished at our own diversity. There are so many different ways in which Islam is expressed, from the very peaceful to the very violent. And I don't think we have a real theological understanding of why certain positions are acceptable and others aren't. And lastly, if I can say, I think we are also grappling with the idea of moral change and moral progress. So, for example, in 7th century Arabia, slavery was frowned upon, but it was still an accepted part of society. Today, we don't accept it. It'd be interesting to see that kind of moral progress being applied to different areas of our theories.
It's interesting. In one part of the book, you talk about responsibility, and you know, often after a major terrorist attack, there's clerics who come out and say this isn't being done in the name of Islam, or Islam has nothing to do with it. Let's just pull out an extract from the book. You say, others say that the violent extremists who belong to groups such as the Islamic State are not true Muslims. Those people have nothing to do with Islam. To my ears, this statement does not sound right. It seems like an easy way of not thinking through some of the difficult questions. Just expand on that.
Well, I think, you know, it's a kind of a natural reaction to want to distance yourself from this kind of violence. And I think actually it's a wonderful instinct to be able to say, you know, my moral and physical body rejects this kind of approach. And so as an initial step in reaction to violence in the name of Islam, to say that this is not, has nothing to do with us is understandable. But I think if we want to make further progress, we actually need to begin to understand in which ways it is actually related to the texts, in what ways the texts need to be approached with a different kind of spirit. And this is one of the things I think is very important, that you can approach the text of the Quran and the sayings of the Prophet with a certain political outlook. And I think we need to be very conscious of the worldview that we bring to our texts. If you are an angry, frustrated young man, you are likely to find the things that will appeal to you, that empower you, that give you, you know, the adrenaline rush.
It gives us a sense of how vulnerable these young men are. They're looking for answers all the time. Yeah,
they are. And I think that the part of the solution to that will be the socio-economic progress that we can make in the Arab world, but also in the Muslim world as well.
You talk about the responsibility of the individual, and let's just read another quote. The concept of the Ummah, you say, has allowed self-appointed religious authorities to speak in the name of all Muslims. Just tell me a little bit about that, because, you know, these clerics, they sit in these mosques, and in many ways they're removed from the young people who are out there being radicalized.
Well, you know, I don't want to blame the clerics for everything. I mean, the clerics are doing, again, these are a critical part of the Islamic system and Islamic culture. Our clerics do have a tremendous amount to give and to offer. What I'm suggesting here is that the clerics need to sort of reach out a little further. They need to broaden their horizons. We know that they have incredibly in-depth knowledge of the Quran and the prophetic sayings. But do they understand, you know, the modern human psychology, how people react to different kinds of pressures? What does one do, you know, in certain cases of, you know, mental illness? And so that's what I'm really saying.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when you look at it, do you feel that attitudes globally are hardening towards Islam? You know, we're looking at the war in Syria, for example, the migrant crisis, the rise in populist leaders like Donald Trump, who are asking for a database of Muslim names or a ban on Muslims, which, you know, he's raised on a number of occasions.
I look at those statements and I think of them more in terms of the campaign rhetoric, and less about, I think it's less a commentary on a particular style of campaigning and more on, you know, the kinds of moods that he's tapped into. I think that it is a kind of it's a wake-up call for those who, within the Islamic community, think that we can put everything to rest by saying Islam is a religion of peace, this has nothing to do with us. We're gonna have to really investigate our own kind of texts, our own self-understanding, and our own approach to the world.
And just briefly, Ambassador, you are the UAE ambassador to Russia, so I have to ask about the future when we look at relations between the United States and Russia. What's the mood like in Russia? Are they hopeful? Are they seeing a shift and a change in the rhetoric that's coming out of the United States with President-elect Donald Trump?
Well, the thing I've learned, you know, after 8 years in Russia as ambassador there, the Russians are very cautious, and you know, they continually have their doors open and they're continually welcome discussion. I can't say, you know, precisely how the American-Russian relation has been over the last few years, but I know that at least from my friends within the foreign ministry and in the Kremlin that they do believe in working closely with the United States, particularly on questions like Syria.
Ambassador Ghobash, thanks so much for joining us and sharing your thoughts.
Thank you.